This is hard to write down. Part of me doesn't want to, because typing it out makes it feel more real, and I've spent the last 3 months trying to convince myself it wasn't. But I haven't had a decent night's sleep since it happened, and my girlfriend, Sarah, says I should talk about it with someone, even if it's just strangers online. She thinks it might help. I'm not so sure. It happened in October. It happened in October. We live in a 2-story house at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. It's the kind of place where you know your neighbors by their dogs' names, and the worst thing that happens is someone forgetting to bring in their trash cans. Sarah was out of town that weekend, visiting her sister. I was looking forward to it, honestly. Just a couple of days to myself, play some video games, order a pizza, and not have to share the remote. The first night was fine. The second night, Saturday, is the one I can't forget. It started late, maybe around 1 a.m. I'd been up playing a game in the living room, headset on, totally engrossed. I finally logged off, and the sudden silence of the house settled around me. You know that deep, heavy quiet, when you're the only one awake? It's not just an absence of noise, it feels like a presence in itself. The only sounds were the familiar ones. The low hum of the refrigerator, the occasional click of the house settling. I did my usual nightly routine, turned off the downstairs lights, checked that the back door was locked, and headed upstairs. Our cat, Leo, a fat and lazy ginger tabby, was asleep on the landing. I stepped over him and went into our bedroom. I was tired, my eyes gritty from staring at a screen for hours. I brushed my teeth, scrolled on my phone in bed for a bit, and then turned off the light. I was just drifting off when I heard it, a soft thump. It came from downstairs. My first thought was Leo. He's clumsy and has a habit of knocking things off counters. But I'd just seen him upstairs. I sat up a little, listening. The house was silent again. I strained my ears, waiting, but there was nothing. Probably just the ice maker, I muttered to myself, lying back down. Our fridge's ice maker is old and makes a hell of a racket when it drops a new batch. It was a plausible explanation. I closed my eyes and tried to force myself back to sleep. Maybe 10 minutes passed. I was in that weird space between awake and asleep when I heard another sound. This one was different. It was a soft, scraping noise, like a chair leg, being dragged an inch across the hardwood floor in the dining room. This time, I was wide awake. My heart started doing a slow, heavy drum beat in my chest. That wasn't the ice maker, and it wasn't the house settling. I lay perfectly still. For what felt like an eternity, listening, nothing, just the hum of the fridge again. I started rationalizing. Maybe Leo had gone downstairs after all. Maybe he was playing with something, pushing a bottle cap around. It sounded bigger than that, but maybe sound travels weirdly at night. I told myself I was being paranoid because I was alone. Every creak and groan of the house gets amplified when you're the only one there to hear it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I quietly slipped out of bed and crept to my bedroom door, opening it just a crack. The upstairs hallway was dark, lit only by the faint glow of a nightlight in the bathroom. I could see Leo, still curled up on the landing, completely unbothered. If there was someone downstairs, he'd be alert. He's a scaredy cat. That calmed me down more than anything. I went back to bed, feeling a little foolish. I fell asleep for real this time. I woke up a few hours later. I'm not sure what woke me. It wasn't a sound. It was just a feeling. The feeling of something being wrong. The air in the room felt heavy, different. I checked my phone. It was 3:27 a.m., and then I saw it. My bedroom door was open, just a few inches, a dark vertical slit against the faint light of the hallway. I closed it. I remember the specific click of the latch. I never sleep with the door open. Sarah does, but when I'm alone, I always close it. My heart, which had finally calmed down, went into overdrive. I felt a cold dread wash over me, prickling my skin. My mind raced, trying to find a logical reason. A draft. The house shifting. Could I have gotten up in my sleep and opened it? I've never sleepwalked in my life. And Leo, he was no longer on the landing. I couldn't see him. This is the part where a normal person would probably call the police. I just froze. I was too scared to make a sound, too scared to even move. What if someone heard me? The thought was so paralyzing. The idea that I was listening for them, and they were, somewhere in my own house, listening for me. I lay there for I don't know how long. A minute, an hour. Every second stretched into infinity. The silence was absolute. It was worse than the noises. It felt deliberate. Then, the pattern repeated. A soft thump. This time it wasn't downstairs. It was closer. It sounded like it came from the spare bedroom, the one right next to mine. My blood went cold. I couldn't rationalize it anymore. This wasn't the house. This wasn't the cat. I was holding my breath, my ears straining so hard they hurt. And then I heard footsteps. Not on the hardwood downstairs, on the carpeted hallway, right outside my door. They were slow, unbelievably slow, a soft shuff drag like someone in socks, trying not to make a sound, but failing. Someone heavy. My body went completely rigid. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. It was pure animal terror. The sound was so clear. So close, the shuffling stopped, right in front of my door. I was staring at that black slit of the open doorway, expecting to see a shadow, a face, anything. But there was nothing, just darkness. The silence returned thick and suffocating. My mind was screaming. It's right there. It's right outside the door. I waited for the handle to turn, for the door to swing open, for a voice, for a voice. Instead, something worse happened from the other side of the door, from the hallway where the footsteps had stopped. I heard a whisper. It was low and raspy, barely audible. It wasn't words. It was someone mimicking a sound. It was the sound of my cat, Leo, meowing. But it wasn't him. It was a terrible, distorted imitation. A human throat trying to make a cat's sound. A guttural, drawn-out meow, meow. That ended like a question. It was the sound you might make to try and coax an animal out from under a bed. I have never ever felt terror like that in my entire life. The person in the hall wasn't just in my house. They knew I had a cat. They were trying to lure him, or maybe they were trying to lure me, to make me think it was just Leo, to get me to open the door. I finally moved. I scrambled off the bed, crab walking backwards against the far wall, my hand fumbling for my phone on the nightstand. I knocked over a glass of water. It shattered on the floor, and the sound felt like a gunshot in the silence. From the hallway, there was a sudden, sharp intake of breath. Then, heavy, fast footsteps, no longer shuffling, but running, pounding down the stairs. I heard the front door slam open, so hard it hit the wall. I was still on the floor, shaking phone in my hand, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. The police were there in 5 minutes. They did a full sweep. They found the front door wide open, swinging in the breeze. The back door was still locked. They found the broken glass in my bedroom. But they didn't find anyone. What they did find was the screen on the dining room window had been neatly sliced at the bottom, and the window was unlocked. It's a window we never ever opened. They think that's how we got in, quietly, sometime during the night. The most disturbing part, in the spare bedroom, a chair that's always in the corner was pulled out into the middle of the room, facing the door. The police think he was sitting there, waiting, listening, for hours. The thumps I heard, maybe him shifting his weight, the scraping sound, him moving the chair into position. He had been upstairs in the room next to mine the whole time. When I got up to check the landing, he must have been in there, holding his breath, just feet away, the open bedroom door. He must have done that to watch me, to listen, to listen. The thing else, no fingerprints, no clues, just a sliced screen and a house that no longer feels like mine. We found Leo hiding under the bed, in the guest room downstairs. He wouldn't come out for a day. It's been months. We've installed a full security system with cameras and motion detectors. We bolt the windows shut now. But I still don't feel safe. Every night when the house gets quiet, I hear it. The shuffling in the hall, the terrible fake meow. I lie awake for hours, staring at the bedroom door, which I now lock and wedge a chair under. I don't know who it was or what they wanted. Were they just going to rob the place and I woke up, or was it something worse? The thing I can't get out of my head, the question that keeps me awake at 3 a.m. is this. He was just sitting in a chair, in the dark, in the room next to mine. For how long? And what was he waiting for? Okay, I'm writing this down because my friend thinks I should. He says putting it all in one place might help me make sense of it, or at least feel like I'm not crazy. I haven't slept properly in weeks, so forgive me if this is a bit of a ramble. I bought my first house about 6 months ago. It's not much, just a small starter home in one of those newish suburban developments where all the houses look vaguely the same. My street is a loop, and my house is near the back of it, right before the road curves around. Behind my backyard is a small patch of woods that separates our development from an older main road. It's quiet. That was the main selling point. The first few months were great. Unpacking, painting, feeling like a real adult. The quiet was peaceful. Now, I can't stand it. It started on a Tuesday night about 3 weeks ago. I was working late from home, sitting in my little office, which faces the street. It was around 11 p.m. I got up to stretch and looked out the window, just out of habit. That's when I first saw the car. It was a dark, older model sedan, maybe a late 90s Toyota or something. It was parked across the street, a few houses down, under a streetlight. That was flickering on and off. It just seemed odd. Nobody on my street has a car like that, and people rarely have guests over that late. On a weeknight, I told myself it was nothing. Someone visiting, someone who pulled over to make a phone call. I sat back down and tried to work, but my eyes kept getting drawn back to the window. The car didn't move. The flickering streetlight cast it in these weird strobe-like flashes. After about 20 minutes, I got this prickly feeling on the back of my neck. I felt like I was being watched. "You're being paranoid," I said out loud to myself. I stood up, made a big show of drawing the blinds closed, and went to the kitchen to make some tea, feeling like an idiot. When I came back to my office about 10 minutes later, I peeked through the blinds. The car was gone. I felt a wave of relief, but it was mixed with a weird sense of unease. It was like I'd passed some kind of test. I didn't know I was taking the next night. I was watching TV in the living room. My couch is against the back wall, so it faces the front windows. I have those thin, sheer curtains. You can kind of see through during the day. At night, with the lights on inside, you can't see out. But I've always wondered how much someone from the outside can see in. Around 10:30 p.m., my dog, Buster, a little terrier mix, suddenly shot up from his bed. He ran to the front door, hair on his back standing up, and let out a low guttural growl. He never does that. The pizza guy, mailman, Girl Scouts, he greets them all with a wagging tail. I muted the TV. "What is it, boy?" I whispered. I listened. The house was dead silent. I couldn't hear anything outside. No footsteps on the porch, no car door slamming, nothing. After a minute, Buster stopped growling and just stood there staring at the door, whining softly. I tried to rationalize it, a raccoon, a stray cat, but the way he reacted it was different. I crept to the peephole and looked out. The porch was empty. The street was empty. Then I looked further down, towards the flickering streetlight. The dark sedan was back. Same spot. My mouth went dry. This wasn't a coincidence. I stood there, watching through the peephole for what felt like forever. No one got in or out. The car was just sitting there, a black lump under a dying light. It felt menacing. I grabbed my phone thinking I should call the non-emergency line. But what would I say? There's a car parked on my street that I don't recognize. I'd sound like a crazy person. After an hour, I watched the car's headlights flick on. It didn't pull away. It just sat there with the lights on for a full minute, pointing down the street, away from my house. Then it slowly rolled away, disappearing around the curve. The next few nights were hell. I became obsessed. I'd turn off all the lights in the house and just sit in the dark, watching out the office window, waiting. The car came back twice more. Same time, same place. It never stayed for more than an hour. No one ever got out. It just sat there. I felt like I was under surveillance. The breaking point was last Friday. I was expecting it. I got home from work, fed Buster, and then settled into my dark observation post in the office. Sure enough, around 10:45 p.m., the sedan rolled up and parked. This time, however, something changed. The driver's side door opened. I couldn't make out much. It was a figure in dark clothes. Not big, not small, just average. They didn't look at my house. They got out, closed the door quietly, and just started walking down the street, towards the curve at the end of the loop. They walked out of the pool of streetlight and vanished into the darkness. My heart was hammering. What was the plan? Were they going to circle around and come up behind my house through the woods? I ran to the back of the house, peering out the kitchen window into the blackness of the trees, listening. I saw nothing, heard nothing but the wind. After 10 minutes of frantic back and forth between my front and back windows, I went back to the office. The car was still there. The person was still gone. I decided I'd had enough. I was going to call the police. My hand was on my phone when I saw movement. The figure was back. They were walking back up the street, but they didn't get in the car. They crossed the road. They were on my side of the street now. They walked slowly, casually, like someone out for a midnight stroll. They walked past my neighbor's lawn, then my other neighbor's lawn. Then they were on my lawn. I froze. I was standing in the dark, but I felt completely exposed. They walked right up my driveway. They didn't seem to be armed. Their hands were in their pockets. They stopped at the bottom of my porch steps, just outside the range of my motion sensor light. And they just stood there, looking at my house. Not at my window, just at the house itself, as if admiring it. I couldn't breathe. This was it. This was happening. My mind was screaming, "Call 911, call 911," but my body was paralyzed. Then, they took a step forward. The motion light above my garage door clicked on, flooding the driveway in harsh, white light. It was a man, older than I expected, maybe in his 50s. He had a gaunt face, thinning hair. He was wearing a simple dark jacket and jeans. He didn't look like a thug or a monster. He looked tired. When the light hit him, he didn't flinch or run. He slowly turned his head and looked directly up at my office window. He looked right at me. There was no expression on his face, not anger, not curiosity, nothing. He just stared. We were locked like that for maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like my entire life played out in that moment. Then he gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Acknowledgement. The motion light clicked off, plunging the driveway back into darkness. I didn't move. I listened, and I heard it, a soft scraping sound on the front door. He was trying the handle gently at first, then a bit harder. Jiggle, jiggle, scrape. That's what finally broke the spell. I let out a sound, a pathetic, terrified squeak, and stumbled backwards. Knocking over my desk chair, it crashed to the floor. Downstairs, Buster started barking his head off, a frantic, furious sound. I heard a thud from the front porch, like someone stumbling backwards in a hurry. Then, the sound of feet pounding on concrete. I scrambled back to the window, just in time to see him sprinting across the street, jumping into the sedan, and squealing away. The police came. They took my statement. They agreed it was highly suspicious behavior. They put a patrol car through the neighborhood a few times that night. But there was nothing they could really do. No damage, no forced entry. Just a terrified guy. And a story about a weird car. They asked if the man looked familiar, if I had any enemies. I don't. I'm a software guy who just moved to town. My life is boring. It's been a week since that night. The car hasn't come back, but the peace is gone. I can't sleep. Every sound is him coming back. I sit in the dark, watching the street, even though I know I shouldn't. I bought new locks, a camera system I can't really afford. I don't know what he wanted. I don't know if he picked my house at random or if he was targeting me for some reason. The worst part, the part that's truly eating me alive, is the look on his face when he saw me. That blank, empty stare. And the nod. It wasn't a threat. It felt like a confirmation, like he was thinking, "Ah, there you are." This is one of those things I never thought I'd be writing. You read these stories and think, I'd never be that oblivious, or I'd just call the cops immediately. But when it's actually happening, your brain does this weird thing where it tries to rationalize everything because the alternative, that someone is actually trying to hurt you, is too heavy to process. In the moment, this happened about 3 weeks ago. I live in a townhome, the kind where you have neighbors on both sides, but the walls are thick enough that you feel isolated. I'm a freelance graphic designer, so I'm often up until 2:00 or 3 a.m., working in my office, which is just a second bedroom setup, at the back of the house. It was a Tuesday, maybe 12:45 a.m. It was incredibly quiet. I was just finishing up a logo revision, sipping on lukewarm coffee, when I heard a dull thud-thud from the front of the house. It wasn't a break-in sound. It sounded like a heavy book had been dropped on the porch. I stayed still, listening. A few seconds later, my doorbell rang. It's one of those old-school mechanical ones that echoes through the whole house. Ding-dong. A doorbell isn't a friend. I crept to the hallway and looked at the frosted glass of my front door. There was a silhouette, tall, wearing what looked like a bulky jacket. "Who is it?" I called out. I didn't get too close. "Hey, sorry," a man's voice came back. It was muffled, but he sounded stressed. "I'm your neighbor from 4B down the block. I think the delivery driver dropped your package at my place by mistake. The box was open when I found it on my step, and I didn't want the rain to ruin whatever's inside." I looked at the window. It was starting to sleet. "Oh," I said, my guard dropping about 10%. "Can you just leave it on the mat? I'll grab it in a second." "I would," he said, and I heard him shift his weight. "But honestly, man, I think some of the stuff fell out in the street. I gathered what I could, but I wanted to make sure I got it all back to you. It looks like electronics. I don't want to be responsible if it's broken." I hesitated. I had ordered a new drawing tablet. It was expensive, and it was supposed to arrive that day, but the tracking had been wonky. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. He was standing a bit back from the door, holding a medium-sized Amazon box. That looked pretty beat up. He had a hood up because of the sleet, so I couldn't see his face clearly, but he was wearing a standard reflective vest over a parka, like he'd just come from a shift at the warehouse nearby. I reached for the deadbolt. My hand was on the metal when I stopped. "Wait," I said. 4B. "That's the Miller's place. Are you subletting?" There was a tiny pause. "Are you subletting?" There was a tiny pause. Just a beat too long. "Yeah, just moved in a couple of weeks ago," he said. "I'm staying in the basement unit while I get settled." I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. My townhome complex doesn't have basement units. They're all built on concrete slabs. There's no such thing as a basement in this entire development. I took my hand off the lock. I felt sick. "You know what?" I said, trying to keep my voice from cracking. "Just leave the box. I'll check it. Thanks for bringing it by." "Look, man," his voice changed. It wasn't stressed anymore. It was firm, flat. "I'm standing out here in the freezing rain, trying to do you a favor. Just open the door, take your stuff, and let me go home. I'm not a porch pirate." He stepped closer. The silhouette in the frosted glass grew larger. He leaned his head toward the door. "Just open it. I want to make sure you see I didn't steal anything." He started turning the doorknob, rattle, rattle, rattle. It was locked, obviously, but the sound of that knob turning back and forth was the most aggressive thing I've ever heard. "I'm calling the police," I said, backing away into the kitchen. "For what?" he shouted through the door. "For returning your mail? Fine, forget it. Keep your broken shit." I heard him stomp off the porch. I watched from the kitchen window, hiding behind the curtain. I saw him walk down my driveway. But he didn't go toward 4B. He walked across the street and got into a white SUV that had been idling with its lights off. I stood there for 10 minutes, heart pounding, waiting for the car to leave. It didn't. It just sat there. I finally worked up the nerve to call the non-emergency line. While I was on hold, I looked out the window again. The car was gone. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself maybe he was just a confused guy from a different street who got the house numbers mixed up. I almost didn't even go outside to check the box, but curiosity, or maybe the need to prove I wasn't crazy, got the better of me. I turned on every single outdoor light I had. I checked the driveway from the window, empty. I cracked the front door, the chain still on, and looked down. There was no Amazon box. There was a box, though. It was a small, grimy cardboard shoebox, soaking wet from the sleet. I pushed the door shut, locked it, and then, stupidly, I know, I went out through the garage, hopped out, grabbed the box, and ran back in. I needed to know what was in it. I opened the box in the middle of my kitchen floor. It wasn't electronics. Inside the box were about a dozen Polaroid photos. They were all taken from the tree line behind my townhome. They were photos of me, working at my desk, making coffee, watching TV. In every single photo, the timestamp was in the corner. He'd been taking them for the last 3 nights. But the last photo was the one that broke me. It was a photo taken from inside my backyard, looking through the sliding glass door of my office. In the photo, I was sitting at my computer, back turned to the window. You could see the clock on my wall in the photo. It was taken at 12 office. In the photo, I was sitting at my computer, back turned to the window. You could see the clock on my wall in the photo. It was taken at 12:30 a.m. That was 15 minutes before he rang the doorbell. The package wasn't a mistake. It was a lure. He didn't want to return anything. He wanted me to open the door so he wouldn't have to break the glass. He had been standing in my backyard, watching me, then walked around to the front to try to get me to let him in. I called the real 911 then. The cops came, took the box, took the photos. They told me the reflective vest was a common tactic for burglars or predators because people instinctively trust utility workers or people who look like they're on the job. They never found the white SUV. I don't work in that back room anymore. I moved my desk into the living room, where there are no windows behind me. I had a security system installed, with cameras that notify my phone the second someone steps onto the property. 2 nights ago, at 2 a.m., I got a notification, movement detected in backyard. I pulled up the feed, my hands shaking. There was no one there, just the wind blowing the trees. But when I checked the footage from a minute earlier, I saw a flash of something. Just at the edge of the frame, someone was standing, just beyond the reach of the motion light, holding something white, something square, like a camera. I'm moving out next month. I don't care about the lease. I don't care about the money. He isn't trying to rob me. He's documenting me, and I have no idea how many more boxes are waiting for me to find them.